Welcome, everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, societal impacts, or related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I'm your host, Al Richards, and today with our guest, Ty Hansen, we're going to be talking about uplifting those incarcerated. And a lot of the guests that have been on this show, they get it. They get it because they've been there and they've done that. And Ty is one of them. And he spent some time out there and he knows what it's like. So pay attention to what this man has to share with us today because it's going to be awesome. Ty, thank you so much for being
Oh,
with us
Al,
today.
thank you. Really appreciate all the work you do. Listen to your podcast quite a bit and a big fan, and appreciate being able to connect with you for sure. So thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. And I just want to say, thank you to Dave DeRocher for introducing us there at the state capitol. That's how I ended up meeting you. Is you was up there talking with Dave, and he introduced me to you, and we've been able to connect and make this all possible.
Yeah, I love Dave. Love spending time with him, as I'm sure you do. And you can't have enough good friends or good people. So
Amen. Amen to that.
yeah,
So, before the show, Ty, we were talking a little bit about some people that we know.
yeah,
And some time that you actually spent in prison with Dave and also Jordan, who
yeah.
who I know very well. And you said something that, man, you just wanted to get done and get home to your family. And I would think that would be the case for a lot of individuals out there.
You would hope it is more than probably turns out to be the case. Obviously we had the opioid crisis. Obviously we have, the prison system, and a lot of that in the United States is privatized. I'm sure you're aware that the big National Guard, uh, what's it called, where they all vote together, labor union, voted against decriminalizing drugs, which is kind of interesting because that, criminalization of drugs essentially funds the private prisons and the population in which they work with. Um, so there's a ton of really interesting caveats with all of that, right? There's a ton of interesting pieces. But yeah, Jordan Holdaway, myself, Dylan Gibson, Joseph Graney, Dave DeRocher were in the prison this last Tuesday and got to see kind of the startup of a treatment center they're trying to do there in Salt Lake. And it was really interesting. Jordan and I were unit coordinators in the Conquest program in 2011, 2012. And so super cool for us to be able to go back and see some of the roots of the programs we came from. And then always good to have Dave there because he was able to, there's about 6, I think, different dorms that are kind of in the beginnings of programming, in the beginnings of forming a treatment community. And they were doing different seminars and different things. And I think they'd all seen Dave on his TEDx stuff that morning and watched it. And it's a different deal when the big fella walks in himself and walks to the front of the room and gives everybody 5 minutes. So, I think our desire, Al, is to see people get better and have them desire to be better. But I think the one thing that was lacking when we were in it, there weren't a lot of guys like us to show up and say, hey, life's okay. We're doing good. I remember I was in prison. I'd been there, I was a year and a half, and I had a 3-year sentence at the time. And it was the first time they had a graduation ceremony where they had a former inmate come in, Al. And I look back on this now, and the guy was 5'8". He was 110 pounds, soaking wet. He was nervous to be there. He brought his wife with him. He was not an eloquent speaker. He was sweating before he even got up on the stage. But he showed up, and he said 3 things. One, I'm a baseball coach to my son. I have a house with my wife, and I have a business that we own together. And I think they did construction and painting houses. And he said, I have a life I'd never even dreamed of. And I think that was the first time for me, Al, it was put in my head, because it's such a negative system. Most of the things you hear in there is you'll never get out. You'll always come back. People come back over and over, can't get a house, can't travel, you can't vote. And the reality is none of that's, true. That's just, the mentality of the people that are in there. And so, how can we make it better? How can we help incarcerated individuals? There's a guy named James Childs that I work with that started the RISE program in the Utah County Jail. And it's based on the idea that those of us that have gotten out and are still out and doing well can come back in and share our experience, strength, and hope. And just by virtue of that, encourage people to do better. I think the one thing we haven't taken into consideration as a society is that no matter where you go in the prison, you're around a bunch of people that are not doing well. And so the advice that you get there, the recommendations you get there, I'm sure you've heard the Damon West coffee bean uh,
No,
story.
it's not sounding familiar.
He's a big national guy that travels around and speaks, and he came out here to Utah, and he's also supposed to come back, I think, to the prison and speak. But the idea is they have a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. You put them into boiled water, right? And this is a story that this guy who's headed to federal prison on a life sentence, and he had an old African American guy pull him aside and tell him the story and said, you're going to go into some boiling water. You can be an egg, and you can get hard, and you can be hard, and that's going to go one way. You can be a carrot, and you can get super soft, right? And that has another set of circumstances and consequences that come with it. Or you can be a coffee bean, and you can make everything around you better. You can adapt to the water, and you can come out, improving the circumstances as opposed to being affected by your circumstances. And so it's a really good message that he kind of carries around the country, and one that we've really tried to carry out here locally, right? That you can get out, you can vote. 2 years ago in December, I was fully pardoned for everything that I'd been through, which means full restitution, full restitution of gun rights and all those cool things. But those, circumstances and those paths we don't talk about enough, and they do exist. Like, people really can have a full restitution of your life and be better than you were before you went in. We just don't talk about those things. The news every day is, sad circumstances and people dying and all of the shock factor things. You don't have, your story, Dave DeRocher's story, Jordan Holdaway's story. My partner, Paul Walkenhorst, was one of the best linebackers at BYU, and he lives a life of recovery today and is this incredible person, yet we never hear about those guys. And that was the thing when I got pardoned. One of the ladies on the board of pardons asked if I would be more active in coming back to the prison and telling my story and getting speakers to come out and share their stories. And so I, over the years, have been in a few meetings with the Department of Corrections and became good friends with the now warden, Bart Mortensen. And he was down in Gunnison. And I called him out and just said, hey, I want to bring some speakers down and see what we can do to kind of improve these guys' lives and get them some information. And for the first time ever, Bart said, cool, you're pardoned. I can't keep you out of here. Really. There was always hesitation, right? Because you were a former inmate. There was a 10-year limitation, right? You had to be off parole for 10 years. You had to be out of the system for 10 years. And then they really didn't make it easy for you to come back. And as a guy that's gone back to school and pursued my master's degree and become a counselor, I had reached out along the way, right, to the other, members of the Department of Correction and just said, hey, I'll come in for free, something I'm passionate about. I'd love to help. I'd love to teach classes. I'd love to just give people some hope. And the door had been shut on us for years, Al. They didn't want us coming. They weren't interested. I probably spent 200 emails to that organization, and nobody, wanted to talk to me or anybody else. And that's evolved. So Bart allowed us access, and it was the coolest thing in the world the last couple of years, Al. I've had, Keaton the Muscle from Diesel Brothers flew his helicopter down, came in, talked to the inmates. We had Jimmy Rex, we had Sean Whalen, we had Jeremy Nevis, we had Ryan Leaf zoom in, and you've heard his story. I mean, from the Chargers, getting drafted number 2 overall to losing everything and going to prison in Montana, and a bunch of Lemma Harrington, just good recovery people coming down, sharing their stories. And the craziest thing happened out. The big message with the inmates was fantastic, right? We had Damian Trujillo, who I'm sure you know, and he's an old gang member from Salt Lake County, from Rose Park. And for the first time ever, they had Max. They pulled Max out. They cordoned off. They put him in 4 different sections, and they allowed Damien and I to come down and talk to the guys in Max, talk to the active gang guys. And it was incredible. There wasn't a sound in the room. I thought for sure, because I'm not that guy. I'm a drug addict, white collar guy, not a gang member. I thought I'm going to be murdered for sure this time, right? I'm telling my wife, like, this is a terrible idea. But the Department of Corrections has been awesome, and that message for those guys was just incredible, right? Like, they have one of their own guys come in and talk to them about being out, getting out of the gang, and what all that does. And then we had one more guy that you need to have on, and I'll give you his contact, Al. His name's Peter Meyerhoff, and he's a guy out of Arizona that has, at 17 years old, had the craziest charges. He and 6 of his buddies on the football team broke into some houses and stole some stuff, and the judge tried to give him life in prison for some Jordan sandals and something else. But the judge believed that if you went in at 18, you shouldn't get out until you're 30, because anybody that gets out in that range never gets better. So he really stuck it to this guy. This kid was super upset. He was a great athlete. He's 6'4". He's probably 250 and just a stud. He goes in, Al, he runs the white supremacists in Arizona and becomes this guy who's stabbing people and beating people up and involved in all this stuff. He decides he's going to turn his life around, gets out, and he flew down from Arizona to talk to the other gang unit. But he's a white supremacist with all of the tattoos and all this stuff. And he lifts his shirt up in this big meeting with 200 gang members, and he's got it all removed, right? He's got it either blacked out or the tattoos removed. And then he's married to an African-American girl in Arizona. And he's just talking about, like, look, guys, everything we were told, the way life's supposed to be, none of it's how it actually is. Let me tell you how life actually is. Showed a picture of his little boy that's, half white, half black, and just said, my life's amazing today.
This is so cool to hear that they're allowing this to happen,
Yeah.
right? Because and this, Ty, it's using our voice,
Yeah.
right? Because I've got this new saying that I like using now: if not us, then who?
Yeah.
Right. So it has to be individuals like yourself and like Dave and Robert and Dylan and Jordan and Diago. I mean, all these guys, because
Yeah.
I remember when I had Robert on the show, and I don't remember Robert's last name, but he's out there at the Other Side Academy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And he was talking about growing up in LA, growing up in the gangs, and how you finally hit the big time when you went to prison, right? Everybody celebrated it. And he goes, it's so crazy because we think that's how life is. That's how everybody lives their life, right? Not realizing what life is all about. And it's not anything against where they grew up, because they had no choice. They were placed in it. They went along with how the system, or how life went, not the system, how life went, right? And we get so caught up in that, not realizing what's out there. And when you have individuals like yourself that can go out there and go, look, you can get away from all this. Your whole life can completely change if you choose to.
Yeah.
I went from probably the biggest liar and manipulator that I know of, right? I could lie my way or manipulate my way through anything as long as Al got what Al wanted. That's all I gave a shit.
Yeah.
To where somebody told me that, I called BS on it, and then I really started thinking. And for the past 15 years, that's all I've done is work on changing who I am as an individual. And it's getting rid of those old habits
Mhm.
and looking at life in a totally different way. And there are some people that I no longer associate with
Yeah.
because I cannot have that in my life, right? If I want to get to where I want to go, I can't have that in my life. And when you hang out with individuals, I mean, I had a lemma on my show. What an amazing freaking man.
Oh,
Love that guy to death.
oh yeah.
And you hear his story, and it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible. And to have all you guys go out and talk to these inmates and go, man, look, doesn't have to be this way at all. And it's the simple things, right? The simple things. You just talked about this guy who he's got a house, he's got a wife, he's got a business and a little kid. That's life,
Yep.
right? That's what it's about. It's not out running amok and causing issues and causing harm to others, because this other stuff brings so much more joy to us.
Yeah, and it is. It's paying your bills and all the stuff that, you know, but even wearing your own underwear, like it's fascinating. And to that point, Al, I think in all of our addictions, you're master manipulators. You're doing everything. I would lie, steal, cheat, did whatever it is to stay high. Didn't want to feel the feelings. I had a mom die at a young age, and that allowed me to hate God, and also allowed me to kind of say God had done me dirty so I can do everybody else dirty kind of thing. And I had a therapist in prison, Al, that told me this: you're so good, you're articulate, you're a master manipulator. What if you used half of the skills, talents, and abilities you had for good? And she said, um, what we call manipulation, if it's in the form of a positive influence. And I said, what do we call that? And she said, well, we don't call it manipulation, and you don't go to prison for it. And I thought, that's that is just a brilliant idea. So the same thing. I have a lot of the skills that I'm sure you do, Al, and we're kind of importune. A guy told me. So if I bite on something, I'm not going to let it go. I really wanted to be in the prison. I felt like I needed to be there. This pardon gave me the opportunity where you really can't keep me out anymore, which is kind of fascinating. But all I'm trying to do is tell these stories, give some guys some hugs. There's even a program I need to have you go visit in Summit County right now under Lieutenant Evans and Christina Dela Cruz, where they have a bunch of lifers that have created a kind of a motiversity thing where they're doing and telling their stories. And I went out a couple weeks ago, and it's all guys with life sentence cells, to your point, that just made one bad decision. They got in a car with a gang member who shot somebody. They got high and shot somebody for like the first time, Alan, lost their mind, were completely, and ended up shooting somebody or being in a shooting. And it's all circumstances that, had our lives been different, you could sit in that chair and you could see yourself doing life. And I probably cried the entire hour that they told their stories, because the reality is the only difference between them and I is I had two good parents. I grew up in the church. I knew right from wrong. I had all these different opportunities. And a lot of these guys, mom and dad were using drugs at the age of 9. They got drugs or were smoking weed at the age of 10. There's all these different things that were going on. And they did not have the opportunities I had to say no, to know right from wrong. I mean, imagine your favorite, I had a therapist that helped me get sober named Desmond Lomax, who's just a stud, and he presents all over the world, and he moved to Maryland, and I love this guy so much. If he called me and said, you know, we've got to go do some bad things today, you would at least think about it, right? And these guys grew up where your mom, your dad, your cousins, the people you look up to are saying, we're going to go do some bad things, right? And these guys are saying, your car or mine, because they're too young, they're too influenced, they grew up in gangs. I mean, all these things where there wasn't somebody, right, Al, to step in and say, guys, you could pay for this forever. They were saying, just get in the car.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to go back and help out. And then even to go, hey, okay, we're here today, right? We're all here. You're going to get out. We know 98% of every incarcerated person is going to get out at some point. What are we doing right now that we can replicate when we get out, right? There was a guard that told me, when you get out, get one job, do it really good, get a second job, do it really good, and you'll know you've made it when you have a third job at night and you're doing that, and you won't have time to get in trouble. And I swear, I went out and did exactly that. I was working concrete by day, I was at a treatment center at night, and I was working at a plastics factory, on the weekends and the nights that I wasn't working at the other thing, just to get over. And I remember being out 6 months, being completely sober, having some money in the bank, and going, "This is awesome."
Yeah.
I'd never worked harder. I'd never had more terrible jobs. All of those completely helped me get my education because they were terrible, right? If you don't think you want a master's degree, go do concrete for a couple months, right? And then you'll
That's
think,
what I
oh,
do for a living. I do
is it?
concrete. So I
Yeah.
know what you
Oh
mean.
man.
Yeah.
There was nothing that made talking to people for a living sound any better than doing
Yeah. Yeah. I helped my brother grow his concrete business, and it's small. It's just him, really no employees. We had a guy that worked for us for many years, and he just passed from cancer. And so I broke away from doing what I was doing to help my brother. And, I'm going to be 61 in July. And I tell you what, I mean, it takes me 5 minutes to get off my hands and knees now after
Oh,
working the
yeah.
concrete. I just
Oh,
don't bounce up anymore like I used to.
absolutely. And it was good. I worked for my cousin, and he was crazy, and we worked around the clock, but man, and those are good things, the self-confidence that comes with them, right? The idea that I could be sober for 6 months was never in my head, and the idea that I could survive on my own had never come to me. And so it's nice to be able to go in and say, look, guys, this is going to be difficult, but you can vote, you can have a house, you can get married. I coached my son's baseball team. I coached the worst baseball team in the history of Orem, Utah, right, for quite some time. And I didn't drink and get high as much as I wanted to because we were terrible, right? But it wasn't a way I was able to cope with things. And so all of those things, right, go back to this life that you can have is so wonderful and so helpful. And running the largest treatment center in the state today, the largest private treatment center in the state. I was in the detox the other day, right? And my buddy was asking me, how come you stay sober all the time? And I said, well, I was in the detox the other day, and a guy comes out, his hair's straight up, he's got half a shirt on one sock on one foot, no shoe on the other. And he says, am I okay? And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to drink today, because that was what I looked like when I drank, right? It wasn't a social, gentlemanly, kind of thing. It was just so hard. My life just went off the rails.
Yeah. And it's rewiring those neurons. So like you said, this individual told you to go out and get 3 jobs, right? To get that brain fired in different ways. Because we can unplug any of these bad neurons as we
Yeah.
choose to, right? And the longer we stay sober, the healthier this firing starts happening, to where we actually start coming to be our own selves again, if not someone better, which that's what I have found the case
Yeah.
with all the people, hundreds of people that I've interviewed, is we all end up coming back a better version of ourselves that we had no clue was in us.
Yeah.
And I get emotional, get emotional sometimes thinking about this, because this show's been a blessing for me, because it's individuals like yourself, Ty, and so many of our other guests who've opened my eyes about how to look at life.
Yeah.
Because I've not even come close to what the majority of my guests have gone through, not even close. And for them to look at life that the way that they do, especially those who have come out of incarceration, man, those are the people I want to hang with, because they're so inspiring, right? They understand the gratitude of being out here every single day, when the majority of us take granted. We take it for granted. And I'm so grateful for everything. I wake up with so much gratitude every single day. And I live in a freaking 31-foot camping trailer. I couldn't pay the high rent anymore for a little 900 square foot apartment.
Yeah.
And so I went and bought a trailer, parked it in my mom's backyard. She's got an acre, parked it right next to the barn. And at first I was calling myself a professional camper. And I was working with a coach, and he's like, so why aren't you owning it? You're not owning it. Why is that not your castle? And I got thinking, I'm like, holy shit, I got a shower. It's tiny, but by God, I have a shower. I mean, I don't have all my belongings, but that's okay. I don't need all these belongings to wake up and be happy every single day. And you understand it because you lived
Yeah.
in a cell,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I still have more than what you had
Yeah.
living in a
Well,
cell
there's
compared to camper.
there's 6,000 people in Utah that would kill to have that trailer, Al. You know,
Exactly.
and it's the reality. Look at, it's all about perspective. And I'm glad you're having that experience. It's similar to the one I had. I thought I would go into this, Al, and it would help the inmates. And the reality was this did help the inmates to some degree. Now, we had like Dan, the laptop man, Dan Young,
Yeah.
come in, and he has ADHD, and he talked about ADHD, and it was brilliant. And he said, I don't medicate it. It's my superpower. It allows me to work around the clock. And he's this brilliant guy, but he's given business advice to people that can't, pay their taxes or pay their bills. And so some of it went over their heads. But the one thing that was super cool in all this, Al, is the guards saw some people come back and give back to them that they hadn't seen before. And so this is the cool part now is I go to Salt Lake County or Gunnison, and it's like old home week. And I can honestly tell you this. I took a guy named Gary Fisher, who's the guy that started Cirque Lodge back in the day. And he spent 6 years in federal prison on cocaine charges. And he was he was a guy that came in when I was there, Al, and spoke to us. And it was incredible to hear his story because he was the second story that I heard of somebody that got out, had this incredible life. And all he said was, I work in recovery, I am in recovery, and it's absolutely wonderful. And so that talk meant so much to me. I brought him down as my first talk to Gunnison to kind of tell the message because I've understand, I am kind of cool, but my friends are way cooler, Al. Like that's, I can show up and be the guy in the background and listen to Dave all day because Dave's just, he's Dave or or Jordan Holdaway. And I'm completely okay with that. So we had Gary come down and we walk out, right, to go into the chapel. And they had 300 dudes in the chapel the first time. And we walk out and the entire SWAT team is there to escort us in, right? And I can remember being locked up. I can remember what SWAT meant. I remember how much they didn't like us and they didn't like them. And old Gary Fisher, unbeknownst to him, is just being himself, shakes everybody's hand. Thanks for being here, giving them hugs. Thanks for being here to the SWAT team. The SWAT team doesn't know what to do. I'm going behind him, shaking everybody's hand, right? And these guys became our absolute best friends, are absolutely the coolest guys, right? And it was the coolest thing that happened when everybody sees each other as humans and brothers and sisters and everything else. And now I think that's been the biggest part of it is it's good for the guards who never saw anybody that was doing well come back, seeing guys come back over and over that want to help, that want to jump in, that can give some advice that can help them. And so that's been the coolest part of all. You just don't know who you're going to influence and what that's going to look like. But I've got more friends that are guards now that I absolutely love, and more friends that I hang out with Mike Smith at the Utah County Jail and his undersheriff Buffton and those guys, and they've made me an honorary colonel now at the sheriff's office from just hanging out with them. But man, they're the best people in the world. My childhood friend Josh Adams, who is the Orem police chief, just got the Chief of the Year award, and you've never had anybody be more mad that they won an award in their entire life, but Josh. But he's the greatest guy ever. He just doesn't want anybody to know about it, right? He doesn't want any of the recognition from it. And so they're just great people, Al, in your space and mine. And it's so cool to rub shoulders with them today. I got to be, I grew up with a guy named Judge Romney, and he was one of the big judges in Provo. And in my addiction, I went before him, and he and I were neighbors and friends. And I remember him seeing me at my worst and just being moved to tears. And he was one of those guys, Al, when I got out of prison, he called me every month and made sure I went and ate with him. And we've done that up until this point. He just barely won an LDS mission, but he was like 7-time judge of the year. And he never would, his conversation with me out every time was the same thing Josh says, was the same thing Warden Mortensen says, was the same thing Judge Romney said, was how can I be better at my job? And I'm a felon, I'm a criminal, I'm nobody, you know what I mean? And even Dave DeRocher will do this, right? Like, what can I do for you? Like, you guys got to be kidding me. You're the coolest people on the entire earth. I ain't got nothing to offer you. But to you, right, in that moment, everybody does. And so I think that's been an incredible lesson for me of all these incredible people that just don't talk about it. They work their butts off and they do anything for anybody.
And you said it just a little bit ago, Ty, with the guards. They look at others as individuals, as people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, true human beings, because I'm sure those that are incarcerated are already feeling like they're not worthy, right? And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
now say there are some that do belong in there.
Yes.
We know that. However, there's also quite a few that's in there that don't they don't belong, they don't need to be in there as long as that they're there.
Yeah.
They, like you said it earlier, they just made bad choices.
Well, prisons for people we're scared of, not for people we're mad at. Right?
Exactly.
Somewhere we
Yeah.
blurred those lines, but that's one of my favorite quotes. If you're an actual scary person and you hurt kids, and there's things like you should go away and you need to be there
Yeah.
forever, whatever that is. But for people with addictions and mental health stuff, I mean, mental health, you understand this, Al. Nothing ever got better by putting someone with mental health issues in a smaller box,
No.
right?
Uh-uh.
And trying to medicate them and everything else. They need to take their shoes off in the grass and go for a walk and have medication and have support, right? It doesn't get any better in that box.
Right. And for people like ourselves who want to go out there and make a difference and use these voices, one of the other reasons, and I was spinning off of this from what you just said, to do this podcast was all the mistakes that I made.
Yeah.
And how, I mean, I'm one of the first ones to lift my hand up and go, yeah, I used to go downtown and look at the unsheltered and the addicts down there and
Oh, yeah.
say my comments underneath my breath, or people holding up the signs and all that. Get a damn job, you effing bum. And
Yeah.
I'm making all these comments, right? Now I get into the recovery community and they start changing my whole perspective of looking at these people as people. They have a mom, they have a dad,
Yeah.
possibly a wife. They have people who love them, who care about them. Yet society looks at them like they're complete monsters and they're worthless and they don't belong to be here,
Yeah.
when that is such BS. And I really got a huge taste of it 2 years ago. I happened to be invited to go to um, a neighborhood protest here in West Jordan, where I grew up.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the city officials here. I've known the mayor now, the past mayors and things like that from my involvement in the community. And being at this protest, I had a couple next to me. This one lady, she used to work at AP&P, and it was triggering my wife at the time. It was triggering her so bad. She goes, I got to go back to the truck. I can't be here. They're triggering me like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that they were saying. And and this lady started yelling, I worked at APP and I see who these people are. And she's basically talking about them like they do not belong. This is an animal that's walking in this building, right? That's not a human being.
Mhm.
And I remember turning to her and I says, you need to be careful what you're saying. And she goes, why is that? I says, because what you're saying, you're talking about my wife.
Yeah.
And I don't like it, and it just it reminded me of the old 1930 or 40 Frankenstein movie,
Yeah.
right? When they find out he's a monster and they got their pitchforks and their torches, and by God, they're gonna go kill this guy when they
Yeah.
know nothing about the individual.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminds me of. And that freaking evening opened my eyes so much And
Yep.
to be able to do this show and have people, and I want to rephrase that, to have individuals come on like yourself and so many others to go, look, this was my life, but that's not who I am now,
Yep.
right? I made bad choices and it was a mistake. I've had to pay for it. And one thing that I don't know, maybe in our lifetime, Ty, I understand we're the only country that when someone pays their dues in other countries, it's completely wiped off their slate. Here in the United States, they have to pay for that the rest of their lives. They
Yep.
want people to know this is what they did.
Yep.
Why? And
Yep.
I don't know if it's greed because it's the money, the continuous money that can come. I don't know what it is, but why the hell is it that we're doing that? I mean, if I cheated on my wife years ago and I really got my shit together, am I going to have that on my record to where I want to start another relationship and be a different human being, but now I can't because the wife who I want to marry or the girl I want to marry now, oh, well, you cheated on your wife, so you're probably still a cheater,
Yeah.
right?
But
What's the
but there's
difference?
parts of society that look at it like this. Here's an example, and I share this with you in your podcast, and just if you guys will be gentle with me, I'll share this. Like I have a family member, right, that has mental health issues. And we've had this individual go to our recovery center, and this individual's gone to other recovery centers. And in the last little while, um, this individual's mental health has gone terrible, right? So she's, gone online and threatened myself. She's called my dad and threatened my dad. She's called my brother and threatened my brother because her mental health, she's been taking so many drugs for so long and all these other personal issues are going on. She's just in this space where she's attacking everyone, right? Everybody's kind of cut her off and stayed away because it's so painful, and she doesn't want help. She just wants to live in the chaos and have all these problems. And you understand this out. Like if I'm cool, right? Like you can threaten me, that's fine. If you threaten my family or like my associates, that's a different thing, right? Like and as a therapist, I know you got to cut people off until they want help, and they work on things. And there's all these different issues that go around this problem. But because it's a family member, right? This person's in jail. They need help next week. And so I'm going to be going to court to advocate to get them into treatment because it's the right thing to do, right? Every fiber of my being wants to say, I'm out, I'm done, but if you want to be a good person, you have to do what good people do. And so, as somebody showed up for you, Al, as somebody showed up for me, I'm going to show up for them, even if it's just to get you somewhere to get some help because I care. You know what I mean? And I think that's the difference today, right? Like you and I can, you know, help out, we can advocate, we can be kind of the voice of reason in some of these conversations. And hopefully, people will listen. Hopefully, we're informed enough to help more than we would have heard back in the old days. But I think that's the big thing now is where we have a little bit of a platform and where we know some people and where we've had some successes, how can we help more, right? How can we do more? And I think that's the nice thing with the prison is you have a captive audience where you can speak to 100 and 200 or 200 guys and just say, hey, this is a bump in the road. This doesn't have to be the end. And here's what you can do. And the nice thing with the other side academy is when those guys are there, Al, it's easy to say, if you don't have options when you get out of here, here's an option, right? These guys have housing, they have resources, it's free, they'll put you to work, they'll give you a job. And the foray into that has been awesome. I think the hope is at some point we can have enough conversations with legislation. And I'd like your take on this, Al. I think for guys that have 5 to 10 years, right? We know that people that have one sentinel event, right, where it's somebody gets hurt in a car wreck or it's the first charges they've ever had in their major, those guys never recidivate. They have a 99.9% chance of going back out and being successful, and you'll never hear from them again. For the guys that have 25 to 30 arrests and don't have the ability to work and not do drugs and all these things, if we could shorten their sentences, put them in the other side academy, right? Release them to them. Say to the Board of Pardons, we're going to give you 3 years to finish the other side academy. If you leave, we'll give you the bulk of your sentence, right? But in the meantime, here's one more opportunity to get out and do well. I think it would reduce the strain that we have on the numbers in the prison, and you would get a good barometer of, do you really want to be here and stay in prison for a long time, or are you willing to do something else? And if you are, here's the opportunity to do that. Right. And I think that's that kind of what you're talking about with Sweden and Portugal. They're giving you work release, they're giving you jobs, they're giving you the opportunity to learn something and be better. And that's the one thing I don't think we do well enough in the current prison system that we could access through some more jobs, through the Other Side Academy, through the Red Barn, you know what I mean, through some of these other programs in there that I think would be a really nice piece.
No, I concur with everything that you just said, Ty. Seriously, it, we need to have something set up, especially even those who, let's say they've paid their full sentence, right? And it's time for them to get out. A couple years ago, I happened to be at a credit union in Sandy, and I went in to go make a payment, and I come out and my wife's out there talking to some guy. She's smoking a cigarette, he's smoking a cigarette, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, and he's got this bag. He's holding this sack, basically, right? If I
Mm,
remember right, it was like a white net bag.
yeah.
And I go up and she goes, "Hey, this is so and so, and he just got out of prison." And I'm going, "Okay." He asked if I had a cigarette, and he goes, "Dude, I just got out of prison. I'm not trying,
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to where I normally go back to, because I know if I do, I'm going to end up back to where I just got released from. And I'm doing everything I can to stay away from there. And I know a place I can go where I could possibly get some help. I just don't know how to get there. I know I need to take a bus, and I'm just not for sure which bus stop gets me there. And my wife, of course, she had lost her license from all her drinking and driving, and she
Mm,
knows the bus system very
yeah.
well. I allowed this man to get in my vehicle with my wife and I, not knowing this guy, just knowing he just got out of prison. But I could see the light in this frickin' guy's eyes that he was scared to go back to where what got him there in the first place. And we ended up taking him this bus stop. And my wife actually gave him half of her smokes. Here's some smokes, to keep you held over. And that guy was so thankful. What you're saying, how to release a lot of these people to the Other Side Academy and Red Barn and places like that, we also need something like that for those who are just getting out. Because again, they don't know where to go. Now, if you release them back in certain situations, not all of them, certain situations, you're releasing them back into a toxic environment. And Davis said that many times in his talks, right?
Absolutely.
Even
Yeah.
with family, you're releasing them back into a toxic environment. Where do you expect them to go? They're going to go right back to the same life that they've always known. However, if we can show them something different, you know, I did home remodels for the past couple of years before I pulled away to start helping my brother with some things. Every person I worked with is in recovery.
Yeah.
Three of them graduated from Renaissance Ranch. They're now going out there and speaking, and they're doing, they're part of the alumni, and they're doing
Yeah.
all this stuff. And to see who these friends of mine, who they are as individuals today. And it's so cool that the guy that we all work for is willing to open up his arms and go, okay, we got a huge deal for a house, remodeling this house at the bottom of Cottonwood Canyon. I mean, this is $1 million something renovation to this home. The family, the lady and husband who lived there, they're from Wisconsin, and their son was in prison in Wisconsin, and they've been able to get him out somehow, some way, to move him back here. And this couple loves all of us so much. I mean, we'd be working, and the husband would go downstairs where we hadn't started the renovation yet and cook us all lunch and bring us up lunch. And he's a damn good cook. And she asked the owner, "My son's getting out. He's coming back here. Would you hire him?"
Yeah.
And he says, "Absolutely." She goes, because I hear you guys talk all day long. You guys are always very inspirational. You're spiritual. You're always helping one another, and we're sharing things all day long on this work site. And she goes, that's what my son needs. And he's been with them now for I think almost 6 months and just thriving.
Yep.
So what you just said is a proven fact. And the Other Side Academy is a proven fact. And so is Red Bard, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's you can't put people around people that are as sick as them or sicker than them and expect them to be healthy, right? And I think there's been so many good guards that were there for me and good therapists, but that's one person in this pool of 6,000, you know what I mean? And they were so influential because somewhere in my story I decided that, these guards are going home at night, sleeping with their wives and having lives. They're probably going to give me better advice than the guy sleeping next to me, right? And I think that's exactly it, Alice. How can we facilitate these guys having more access to people that are in recovery that have done well, right? Through AA meetings, through anything, right? Podcasts. Like in Arizona, they have tablets. They can listen to podcasts. They have access to information. I think there's not a limit to the amount of good stuff we can put in front of them that's not going to help them because of that exact fact. Like when you're in your addiction and when you're in prison or when you're in jail, the people you're surrounded with are the people that are struggling, right? So those messages, the advice, we were in the prison and this guy's talking about owning a business and owning a restaurant, and he's doing that speech from the perspective of an inmate, which is fantastic, right? But how much better is it from Dave, who was incarcerated for 30 years to walk up and tell his story on the other side, not wearing whites that day,
Yeah.
Then I think that's just the one piece. If we can figure this out, Al, I think it's absolutely going to be fantastic. And the prisons, admin team, Brian Red, uh, Bart Mortensen, the new warden down in Gunnison, Kiesel. I mean, they're fantastic, and we're finally open to having more of these things and bringing speakers and doing these things. And so it's good. But to your point, I don't think we can do enough, right? And those conversations, those small conversations, like who are you talking to? How's that going to influence you? We know that you're going to become the 5 people you surround yourself with. So how can we put 5 good people around every inmate, right?
Amen. Yeah. Amen. It would be cool too well, we have them, right? We've already mentioned some that to be able to have a different type of organization. Because I remember when my wife's public defender called me up once and goes, Al, man, the courts are getting tired of her. She's getting close to going out and point of the mountain or doing some heavy jail time, right? Whichever one. And I remember telling him, she's not a freaking criminal. Other than breaking the law of drinking and driving where she could have killed someone and killed herself. Yeah, she broke the law there. But other than being an alcoholic, she's an alcoholic. And yet she's looking at doing time. And he goes, well, what do you suggest? I says, well, first of all, I disagree with how the system is set up with that.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing it for the first time because now I'm with someone who's in the system, right? I'm like, she needs somebody to get inside her head and find out what's causing her, because it's not the alcohol.
Yeah.
It's not the alcohol that she's going back to that just to stop the bleeding, whatever bleeding's happening inside of her. So to be able to have a program, and there's, oh my gosh, what do they call that? Few of the people I've interviewed on the show, drug court,
Yeah.
that's really helped. It's saved their
Oh,
lives,
it's
right?
fantastic. That entire system, Al. We've got a lot of veterans that go through veterans court and drug court, and it's just like the Other Side Academy. I mean, it's the one opportunity you get to walk out of there with no felonies and nothing on your record, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And we need more of those. Again, I'm just spinning off of what you're saying here. We definitely need more of this. And I don't know the true numbers, and I guess I could look it up, and you may even know, Ty. I think the majority of the people that are in prison are because of drug related charges. And again, I don't know
Well,
if it's
I
half or more or what.
I think somebody said it was 60 to 70%
Okay,
of
that's
all
what I heard.
currently incarcerated individuals are drug people, right?
Yeah,
And that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. The problem I have with it is probably the same problem you have with it, Al, is we legalized Oxycontin. We put this mess, and I was one of those people, right? I went to a doctor. This doctor wants to give me Oxycontin because it's not addictive. I mean, that just, and I'm an addict, whatever that is, you know, we created this pay for play system that is in a privatized prison system also, where, now the borders are open, right? So fentanyl is just dumping in and it's killing people left and right. I mean, some of these systematic things that are truly and have to be driven by money because they're not driven by anything other than insanity.
yeah,
How can I talk to Josh Adams, the chief of police in Orem all the time, and this, like we could secure the border with drones for nothing, right? Like we have the capability and technology to do these things. Why don't we? You know what I mean? And who is benefiting and why are they benefiting? And yeah, the same thing with the prison system. These guys need treatment. They need TOSA. They need Red Barn. They need jobs, right? In Sweden, if you go in, it's an open jail and you're going to work every day so that you have a trade when you get out. And those guys don't recidivate because they'd rather go be an electrical guy than do drugs, right? Like it's not that they don't have options, it's that they didn't have the choice from the circumstances they grew up in.
yeah. Amen. I'm sure you know Todd Sylvester.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, great dude. Matter of fact, my ex actually worked with him when she went to Wasatch, which I didn't know, and I had met him one time before, and I got invited to be on his show,
Yeah.
and he was actually a guest on my show also. And he said something to me that really resonated with me. He was invited to go out to the prison and talk,
Mhm.
and he asked a question. He goes, "How many of you guys are in here because you broke the law?" And of course, all the hands went up, right?
Yeah.
How many are in here because you're a drug addict or something like that? And some of the hands went up. And how many are you here for whatever? And he asked these questions. And after he was done, he goes, "You know what?" He goes, "You're all looking at yourself in the wrong way." He says, "Because a lot of you have been here in here for a year, if not longer. So you've not done any of these things. So you are no longer that person."
Yeah.
And he said when he got done, there was this guy, he's like guy 3 times bigger than me, jumps up, and even the guards started getting ready and started going up the hall, and they stopped him, and he's like, "Okay, yeah, go ahead and let him come up." He says this guy come up with freaking tears just pouring down his face and gave him the biggest hug he had ever had. What he just said to those inmates opened that man's eyes to where he realized that moment he's not who he was that got him in there.
No.
And he goes, literally every single inmate that was in that room came up and shook his hand or gave him a hug.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talking about uplifting those who are incarcerated, that just did it,
Yeah.
right?
It's and I get emotional telling you this. I mean, Amy Daschle and Noella and the girls
Uh-huh.
on the Clean Slate, Destiny
Oh,
Garcia.
I know Destiny really well. Yes, yes, uh-huh.
She works with of two of my heroes, Amy Daschle and Noella Sudbury. They came up with the Clean Slate thing, and I was able to speak in some legislative sessions this last year, and you know they have a 3-year backlog. BCI is really slow. We're really good at incarcerating people and putting them in jail. But even when I got my pardon, it took them 6 months, I think it was 6, 7 months to process the paperwork for me to actually have a pardon, which is, kind of is what it is. But in that system, Salt Lake County was pardoning people that had passed away that had not committed crimes for years. And Al, my little brother was one of those guys. And, it was one of those conversations with my dad where Salt Lake County and the state of Utah did for him what he couldn't do in his lifetime, right? He couldn't stay sober. he couldn't fix his crimes. He couldn't do that. And so he received an expungement after he had passed away. And it meant so much to my parents and meant so much to me that he was no longer, because we, he was only that guy for a short period of time, and he's not that guy today. Right. Yet so many times, to your point, we want to keep people in their worst spot and hold them in their history and punish them for being felons forever. Let me tell you this story. I get into prison and I'm getting out of receiving orientation. And I go over to the drug program and I get there and I don't think I had a mattress the first night and I don't have any sheets and I don't know anybody in prison and I don't come from this world. And I'm trying to fall asleep on my bunk and it's cold and it's in the middle of winter and I'm freezing and I only have one set of clothes and haven't had time to order sweats on commissary and I'm just shivering in my bunk. And this giant guy named Ren, who's 6'9", he's probably 400 pounds. Al comes up and he's walking over to me and he's fully tattooed head to toe. And I'm thinking, prison movies, I'm going to have to fight this guy or he's going to kill me. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to win this fight. Right. And so he comes over, I get up on my feet and he says, Ty, you look cold. I've got some extra sweats and some food. Would you like it? And so what we think prison is, it isn't. Who we think we've locked up is not who we locked up, right? And it's some of the best people in the entire world that maybe made one mistake, that maybe can't stay sober, that maybe have struggled. I mean, imagine all the people we incarcerated because of marijuana for years and years that we just simply owe an apology to now,
Yeah.
right? Because we've changed the laws and everything else, and yet we've taken them away from their families and punished them. And my brother's one of those guys, right? If marijuana would have been legal in his time, he would have smoked weed. Everybody would have left him alone, and he never would have had half the problems he had. And so as we evolve as a society, right, we've gotten super far away from being the left and the right. Now there are these polar opposites. I think it's these conversations out where we can try to figure out to get back to the middle because love really is the answer. Like you giving that guy from prison a ride, Al, didn't mean anything to you, but having been that guy who needed a ride and didn't have one, man, it means everything to me, right? So if we're going to be good people, we have to do what good people do. And we have to look at this in a different way. Because that guy giving me a 4X sweatshirt that I could pull over my whole body and didn't freeze that night meant everything to me. Right. And I didn't deserve that. I hadn't earned it. It wasn't mine. It was just somebody being kind in a place where people aren't known for being kind.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point. Really good point. This whole conversation's been freaking amazing. It's you see your heart in it, right? You see your emotions come out. And again, it's the good quality in so many of us that just we want to be that voice. We want to see a change. We know something different has to happen because what the way we've been doing it all these years isn't working. It's proof that it doesn't work. It's freaking proof. And is greed some of it? Hell, I don't know. It could be. I don't know because I haven't dug deep enough to say yes, it is. Because however, having opportunities. I watched my ex-wife look for a job for 7 months, and she had people that was interested in hiring her, and then it'd get the background check and go, no, sorry, no, sorry. I mean, refusal after refusal after refusal. Luckily, with her support system, as well as her determination to wanting to get back sober and stay sober, she didn't go back to using, she kept fighting. However, so many times, which in her past it happened to her, so many times she fell right back into it because it's like nothing's going to change. So why stop?
Mhm.
Right? What the
Yeah.
hell is it going to matter anyway?
Yeah.
And it's that revolving door where we've got things set up. Okay, yeah, things are set up for failure and it has to change. We need to set things up for success. And will everybody succeed? No, but hell, we can increase that percentage rate
Yeah.
by a long shot.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have a good friend named James Childs, and he just received his pardon. this last couple weeks ago, and the guy's brilliant. Every time I talk to him, I have to have Google out because I don't know half of the words he says. But he started this drug program in jail because he was incarcerated quite a bit as a juvenile, and then as in early adulthood, I think, he must have had 30 or 45 incarcerations. And the guy, he works for a big cellular company today. He went to MIT. Um, he's absolutely brilliant, and now he's, if you're familiar with the LDS Church, he's in a bishopric as I think the second counselor in LDS Church today, and that's what it's all about, man. Like he walked in, fill out his paperwork, did his whole pardon thing, and they called him back in an hour and told him they pardoned him just because of all the good stuff he's done. And he's just one of a myriad of people that you and I know that just it is not who the sum total of what it looks like on a piece of paper. So grateful for you, Al. There's so many good people out there, so many good stories. James is one, Dave's one, you're one, and I'm with you. I wish we could figure out a way to focus on the positives and kind of bring more of these highlights, to light, other than the people that keep going back or struggle or everything else. And even the people that struggle, like, let's jump in. And, my old therapist used to say, if somebody doesn't get better as a therapist, it's not necessarily, if they didn't want to work and they didn't get better, maybe it's not your problem, but maybe it is. So as a society, right, if people keep committing crimes and doing everything, maybe they're pieces of crap and it's their problem, but maybe it's ours.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe we can do something better. Maybe we can be better and help more.
Yeah. That's a really good point. We're we're coming close to ending this because I don't want to take up a lot of your time. And gosh, we've gone over an hour already, which is hard to believe, which is okay. I don't stick to certain time frames on the show. I allow it to go as it goes. Last February I started a networking group called ARC.
Mhm.
And ARC meant addiction, rediction resource collective. And I've now changed it to addiction resilience collective. The whole purpose of it was to bring a collective of businesses who all fall underneath that addiction umbrella. You know, you've said a lot of names. You're in the recovery business, with steps.
Mhm.
You know other people who run other organizations. Y'all know about one another. You're all there. You sometimes you collaborate with different things. There's so many other things out there now compared to what there was 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And it's people who we've been talking about throughout this show. It's individuals who want to make a change, want to make a difference. And it was a pretty good success there for a bit. And then trying to do two jobs, my show, get myself out there to do public speaking and doing this networking group, it just kind of took its toll and I just couldn't put a lot of effort into it. And I like to call it my Holy Spirit throughout.
Mhm.
I mean, for months, it's been saying, you need to get this going, you need to get this going, you need to get it going. I've reached out to some lovely lady friends of mine who all fall under different types of healing stuff.
Mhm.
I went to them, said, hey, this is what I started, and I'd really like to get it up going again. However, I want to make it the number one addiction recovery networking group in this frickin' valley. And I'm
Yeah.
not talking just all recovery centers. I'm talking a plethora of everything that's out there that can help individuals. Not a one of them said, no, not a frickin' one. Every single one of these ladies said, I'm in. When do you want to start? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's schedule a meeting. So we have a meeting next Tuesday to sit down and talk about this, where we could go to places like Steps and hold a networking group, right? And have people that come in and do sound bathing, breath work, meditation, yoga, fitness, proper nutrition, recovery centers. I mean, we're talking all of it.
Yeah.
Bring it all into one resource to where you've mentioned so many flipping names today. I've known a few of them, others I do not, but you've known that by being out there in the community and doing what you do. just think of how many more frickin' tools we can put in our belt if we expand all this.
Yeah, we'd love to help and be a part of anything and be happy to do it. So absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it could turn out to be something just amazing, you know, and again, it's just a networking group. We'll
Yeah.
just sit around and build relationships and basically help one another,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Absolutely. And you can't, yeah, you can't have too many friends and you can't have too many recovery places with everything going on. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, tell us a little bit more about steps.
So steps were, in network with most major providers. We have some really, really good clinicians, but we do the full continuum of care. So I think we've got 300 sober living beds in the state right now. We do residential, inpatient, outpatient, detox, and we've got great people. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Brian Tees, but he's on the Doppel board. He's one of our clinical directors in Payson, and he's fantastic. I don't know if you know Mark Pepper. He's
Mm-mm.
our clinical director in Mill Creek. He's been sober for a long time. Just good people, Al, and that's what a lot of people in recovery. Taz Decker. I don't know if you're familiar with him in St.
I've heard
George.
it. I've heard his name.
Him
Yes.
and Jared Miller kind of run things down there, and
Okay,
they're
I know Jared.
they're incredible. And just have a great organization. We treat a lot of veterans, first responders, and then just everyday people who need a little bit of help. We have a lot of blue collar guys. You know what I mean? Older guys trying to get sober later in their life after they've retired and different things like that. And it's a cool milieu of people and good groups and people that don't know how to do the next right thing but want to. So it's a lot of fun and it's awesome. We have the chief of police comes down on the weekends and talks to the group and Jeff Jones. I don't know if you've heard that name. He was a lieutenant at the Utah County Jail, but he's really famous guy now that comes in and does breath work with them. And he's a former military guy. And so just we've just hired the best people and with the best stories. Brian Tees was one of the first guys to get pardoned in the state of Utah. And so
Wow.
he was an old biker gang guy, and he's got an incredible story. I'll have to connect you with him. But if he didn't get pardoned, Al, myself and James Childs wouldn't have gotten pardoned. So he's really awesome. He's on the Doppel board and knows, he worked at Cirque Lodge for a long time and just great people that that anybody trying to get sober and just can't figure it out, we have the guys for them. So there's at least a couple of them that can help them stay sober and be sober and do that today. So grateful to be in the space, grateful to be able to help people. My phone rings all night and I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. So it's a great thing.
So do you have a website? Is it stepsrecovery.com or something
It's
like that?
Steps RC. So for Recovery Center, stepsrc.com.
Steps RC
Yeah.
Recovery.
Yep.
Okay.
And you're welcome to call us and connect you. We're in network with most major providers. But that being said, if we're not a good fit for you, and this, if you've got mental health stuff, New Roads is the best one in the state of Utah, hands down. If you've had a lot of arrests and criminal stuff, Tosa and Red Barn are going to be better. You know what I mean? But if it's your first foray through things, us, Wasatch, you know, um, are going to be able to help you and have a good outcomes and rates. And we have an app today. We have things for tracking. We have a good alumni program. I think we've got one of the bigger alumni programs in the state. And so a lot of good things. We've been around about 12 years now, so a lot of good outcomes and people and a lot of our former employees, work in the industry and work for us. And that's been a really cool thing over the years to kind of see how it happened. So it's been awesome.
I love it. And where is your location at, Ty?
So the residentials are in St. George and Payson, and then we've got outpatients from Mill Creek, Orem, St. George, all the way down. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, my ex went to the Payson one
Okay.
and she lasted 3 hours. I drove all the way down there and then on my way back, I was almost home and she called. So
Yeah.
actually less than that. I think it was about an hour and said, come and get me.
Uh,
She wasn't ready.
yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't ready. Matter of fact, Steps called me and they're like, we can't find her. She left.
Yeah.
She just disappeared.
Took off,
And
yeah.
somehow she just, yeah, just anyway,
It's a
crazy.
normal thing. I did the same thing. I went to Cirque Lodge in 2001, and I took off and went to my grandma's house and hid in the basement, and my dad came and found me and took me back. So, the idea that you have to be sober is not fun in the beginning.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I really got to stop drinking. I really got to stop using. I don't want to do that. This is
Yeah.
terrible.
Even though it's causing all this turmoil in my life.
Yeah, but their problem isn't that it's causing turmoil. It's that you won't just let them use.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I
That's
don't. I
exactly.
don't really have a problem. My problem is that everybody won't leave me alone.
Yeah. Man, I've heard that so many
Yeah.
times. It's
Oh, I'm sure.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Ty, if there's anything we can do for you, we're here for you.
Appreciate it. Same to you. I appreciate it. Anything you need.
Okay, thank
You
you.
guys.
Thank you. And thank you for your time and thank you for this conversation. I think this is you're the 266th episode and I don't think we ever went in depth this much about talking uplifting those that are incarcerated. So thank you for your knowledge and for your vulnerability in speaking out to this because you know it as well as everyone else. Well, not everyone, but a lot of other people. It's time for things to change.
Yeah, and we're working in that direction. We got good people in place, and I think it's slowly changing. So I hope it continues. So thank you, Al. Thanks for having me on, and appreciate all you do.
Absolutely. Well, guys, again, man, thank you. Thank you for all your support. Say this at the end of every single show, and I will continue to say it. This show's a success because of all you guys, all our listeners, all our guests, our past sponsors, man. You guys are the ones that's made this all possible. So I'm so grateful and appreciative to every single one of you. Remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.